So we are here with a new patch note, and it has a lot of consequences for PvP. We made a tier list yesterday, and I kind of called a lot of shots where they were going to nerf specific specs, and they were nerfed. So they will get nerfed next week. Obviously, Wednesday it will be live for EU, Tuesday for NA, and I think the meta has kind of shifted, but we'll have to see because there's still like a lot of factors that are making what the meta is making. But let's talk about the class changes right away. So we have Death Knights changes to Sunline, which is the second hero talent, for example, for Unholy DK. Vampiric Strike chance to trigger increase to 25% instead of 10%. Frenzied Bloodthirst damage of Deathcore and Death Strike increased by 5% per stack, was 4, so that's actually quite a big buff because you have multiple stacks. And Visceral Strength grants 8% strength instead of 6%. Obviously that is a buff because everyone is playing Rider of the Apocalypse as Unholy DK, also in PvE if I'm not mistaken. So I do feel like it is normal that it is buffed. But I would like to see more nerfs to Rider of the Apocalypse. But there is like some a bit lower, but we'll have to see. Blood DK got a buff on Vampiric Strike damage increased by 20%, and 15% for Infliction of Sorrows instead of 10%. So it's not going to be very impactful for PvP, but maybe for PvE. Now, Heavy Demonology has a lot of bug fixes. So eye damage to be reduced beyond 1 target instead of 5. So that's actually a big buff towards PvE because obviously you're using eye beam for like multi damaging encounters, but also PvP, where I do feel like sometimes you have like a cleave, and if you're doing less damage, obviously it's going to be seeing like this. Prevented eye beam from benefiting from isolated praise damage bonus, so that's also a big buff. And fixed an issue that prevented eye beam from benefiting from chaotic dispositions damage bonus. So overall, a lot of eye beam buffs that bugs that have been fixed, which is great. Now, big buffs towards Balanced Druid, and that is going to help in PvP. All ability damage increased by 6%, but also Star Surge increased by 16%. Now for PvE, you have Starfall damage increased by 20%. And then Elun's Chosen is like the same for PvP. It still is 50% instead of like 80% now for PvE. Overall, great buffs. I think Star Surge is going to hurt a bit more. At least it's going to be scary. And they kind of needed the damage because they kind of got hit on Wrath and Starfire the previous patch. But yeah, they have to know what they want to do, if they want to actually give them like pure spender powers, or if they actually are okay with builders doing damage. So that is like really the question. Feral Druids got like a few buffs and also changes, like for example Blood Talents and Lion Strength no longer also increase the damage of Rampant Ferocity. Has an ongoing discussion between devs and players. All ability damage increased by 3%, Rip by 6%, Ferocious Bite by 3%, and Feral Frenzy damage increased by 10%. So overall it's going to be noticeable because Ferocious Bite is going to do 6% in total, if you see how it works, and Feral Frenzy for 13%, and Rip is going to also do 9% more damage. And then you have also Ravage damage increased by 3%, which is again the same way on how they are buffed with Ferocious Bite. So obviously it's going to work like this. Then you have Restoration Druids, which in my opinion were very, very big PvP buffs. So you have Wrath, Starfire, and Star Surge doing an increase of 20% of damage. And currently Star Surge is doing 500k normal hits. And Wrath kind of does the same, like 500k normal hits if they get the buff from the healer and balanced druids tree. I don't remember the name. But you get like a buff after doing 5 regrowths. You get like a big Wrath or a big Starfire, if I'm not mistaken, and that's quite big. So this is going to be noticeable. Evoker disintegrate damage increased by 10%, and Devastation Evoker got a buff on Eternity Surge damage increased by 10%. Now this is going to be offset by PvP nerfs, so don't worry. It's going to be an overall nerf, but this is good for PvE because I kind of understand that right now PvE evokers are not really doing well, but in PvP they are doing overly well, right? So the nerfs are going to be necessary, and they got nerfed a bit down the patch note. You have Mage getting a few buffs or nerfs, like for example here you have Arcane Fury, Sun Fury they're getting nerfed again. They really want to gut Sun Fury, which is a bit shameful, but whatever. Meteor damage reduced by 15%, and that's all things that also affect PvP, but I do feel like they're playing with Splinter, if I'm not mistaken, instead of the Sun Fury talent. Like Spellslinger, if I'm correct. Sun Fury is not really played in PvP, but this is really going to do even less. Like, it's not going to be that impactful. It's going to be impactful. This looks like a buff though, on how it's worded. Damage bonus for Arcane Blast reduced to 20%. It was reduced by 30%. So I guess this could be seen as a buff. We'll have to see. Fire mages, all ability damage increased by 6% and living bomb by 25%. I think this is still not enough. A power blast does 350k in PvP currently. So 6% is going to move the needle, but it's not going to literally take it out. So that's the issue. Like, you kind of need to buff like power blast by 20% at least to make it like impactful. It still does less damage on the Icelands, which in my opinion doesn't make sense. Mistweaver, all healing increased by 3%. That is going to affect PvP, but they have like a bigger nerf a bit down the patch notes. But they got a PvE buff with Tiger Palm and Rising Sun Kick by 15%. And Windwalker, Darting Hurricanes passive trigger rate reduced by 50%. It now reduces the global cooldown by 0.25 seconds instead of 0.5 seconds. So this is a nerf. I don't know how impactful it is for PvP, but it seems like a nerf. Holy Paladin, those are like very cool changes. So right now we have judgment damage increased by 60%. So it already got increased multiple times in the preseason, but also in the pre-patch. And that 60% is going to be impactful. Crusader Strike as well. But the issue is they did nerf Avenging Crusader transfer amount reduced to 260% instead of 420. So they buffed the damage, but they didn't buff the healing from Avenging Crusader. I wish it was more useful, but right now I think it's not playable in current landscape, especially with the caster meta that is going on. That could change with the few casters that got nerfed, but I think Avenging Crusader is going to be still like a dead talent. Ammo of Wrath doing 20% increased damage is quite nice because it does quite good damage right now. Holy Prism, single target damage increased by 100%, so it will be a good CD to use if you're doing damage, also in PvP. You have the Barrier of Light, if I'm not mistaken, and you have Holy Prism. So most people are playing with Barrier, but I think if the damage is good enough, you could actually do a lot of damage with Holy Prism, with a Judgment, for example, while you're doing your Avenging Wrath. So there is that possibility. Herald of the Sun, downlight damage reduced by 15%. That's actually a big nerf because it is doing top 2 damage, I think, on the details. Now, is it like impactful? You will have to ask like Retribution Paladin mains, but that's for PvE, but it also will go down into PvP as well. We have shadow damage increased by 6%. That is quite impactful because right now shadow damage is not that bad. It is like suffering from getting trained, but that is the case for a lot of classes, to be fair. But I think the main point for Shadow Priest is they have no mobility, so I still like am a defender of Door of Shadows from Shadowlands. They should re-implement that for Shadow Priest. I think that would like help them a lot through a PvP talent or a class talent, because to be fair, in PvE you have also the same problem where you cannot really move in between like fights, or even like if you have to dodge things, you have to really manually dodge, while other specs have more mobility to try to dodge things, for example. Now, Outlaw Rogue, a spec that I play in PvP, which I enjoy a lot, they seem to get nerfed pretty hard, but overall I would say it will be a buff. Let me explain. So all ability damage reduced by 4%. That is quite impactful. Dispatch damage reduced by 10%, which is kind of really I don't really like that because it already doesn't do too much damage in PvP. And melee auto attack damage reduced by 8%, which it does some good melee damage. Because of having always like slice and dice up, you do have a lot of strikes. But the good thing is they do buff the 2 sets and the 4 sets. So we have bonus norm grants listed abilities at 35% chance to deal 30% increased damage as shadow, which is better than physical damage, mind you. It's a 15% buff on that, but also foresight. Between the eyes increased to 15% damage per stack up to 4 stacks. So it means it can do 60% increased damage. And if you're critting on that and you have like the right roll the bones, it will do a lot of damage. And you could maybe do like a pure between the eyes build with even cold blood, so you do crit every single one. But it's, again, you will have to sacrifice a lot of like those class talents to make it work. So I will have to test it. But I do feel like right now, this seems like a buff to me. This seems like a big buff to me, actually. In PvP, it is nerfed, but it will be an overall buff, right? In my eyes. Especially since how I play Outlaw Rogue, it is not really about the throughput 100%, but it has some okay throughput if you actually think about it. But like those shadow damage is going to really add up at the end. Like it's going to help you because you will apply that damage very consistently because you do sinister strikes, you do ambushes, you do pistol shots. So those things are going to be always active, and pistol shot is always like top 1, top 2 damage for me. So that having shadow damage extra would help me a lot, I think. Since only 4% nerf is not going to change pistol shot doing like no damage, right? It's going to be still good. Enhancement also a spec that I really main and I really enjoy. Like I reached right now 1600, which is not that impressive, but like I'm not pushing that hard right now too. And also 1600 in solo queue RPGs, which for me was impressive because enhancement is not really top dog there. But I have like the intention to go 2.4k on both brackets and also in 2s and 3s. And those are going to be good changes. I think Witch Doctor's Ancestry getting nerfed is a bit bad. But it's still like an auto-lock talent though. Like they made it like a 1-pointer is actually the same as like you had to spend 2 points into Witch Doctor's Ancestry to get those 2 seconds off. And now they nerfed it to like a 1 second, so you have only 1 point to put. It was already the case since the preseason, but you don't get the benefits of having 2 points. So now it's like literally just a 1-point talent. It's not that massive, and it will be replaced with mid-season. Mid-season, you're going to play the Feral Spirit proc talent, in my opinion, if it stays like this. We get also a buff on the 2 set. In PvP, it is halved, unfortunately, so it was 3%, and now it's going to be 5%. But that is going to be quite nice. Storm Strike is something I'm spamming every single time, and you also get a Storm Strike buff a bit later down the patch note, which is going to help a lot. So guys, Enhancement Shamans, rejoice, because again, the hard work that you're doing right now is going to pay off at the end. Restoration Shaman got some offensive power, which is also useful for PvP. Lava Burst and Lightning Bolts actually hurts whenever you can actually cast them. So that is going to help, definitely 2s. Solo queue RPGs, I don't think you have that much time to do so, but in Soul Shuffle, whenever you have like a downtime, you can actually cast. It will add up and it will make you win the games. Demonology Warlock, like I said, they were bound to get a buff. I said it in the tier list as well. Demon Bolt getting 20% increased damage is actually massive. Summoned Doomguard damage increased by 45%, so that is a good buff because the talent was not that good. And Felguard damage increased by 15%, which is a massive buff. Like Felguard is one of the pets that are really going to add up over time in a match. And having 15% increased damage on that is actually going to help them deal significant damage over time. Now, is it going to be like a solved problem? I think the problems are more deep. I think it's because of the hero talents and how they work and how it's better for affliction warlocks to play Soul Harvester, while Demonology Warlock it's not that good. It is good, but it's not that good, especially with how Hand of Gul'dan is working compared to Malefic Rupture and Shadow Bolt, how you have to cast it instead of having like Nightfall procs. But and also Diabolus being very annoying to like proc as a Demonology Warlock, but I think that can also always be like fixed in the mid-season. I think that is like design thing, and they need to work on that. Destruction Warlock has a big buff, by the way, like also in PvP. All ability damage increased by 6%, which is massive, and also Dimensional Rift damage increased by 40%. Remember, 6%, it looks not that big, but it's on all abilities. Shadow Burn, Conflag, Incinerate, Chaos Balls, Dimensional Rifts, everything. So I think there will be a playstyle where you could play with Dimensional Rifts, and you're going to play a lot of like those instant casts, and it's going to add up over time with a lot of damage. So this is going to be interesting to play around and to see how it's going. Arms Warrior got a buff for Colossus. Now, I'm not sure if it's enough. I think Colossus has a lot of problems with Demolish. They need to have a full CC immunity, with like the same as how Bladestorm works. So Muscle and Scars increase damage dealt by 5% instead of 4%, it's only 1%, so it's not going to be that big. And damage dealt by Demolish, 2 initial strikes increased by 20%. That's going to help with overall Demolish damage. That is true. Like the last damage is, like the last hit is very big, but the two first hits are like around 300k, 250k. So having 20% on both hits is going to obviously increase the damage, like the total damage of Demolish and the potential of it. So currently I'm trying like a full crit build. Unfortunately, crit is so unreliable. Like having 25% crit is not really paying off, because if you're not critting on the stuff that you want it to be crit, then it feels really bad. But I'm still testing the grounds, especially with the foresight and how it works. It could work, but I have to still like see for myself and how it works. Mountain Thane got a buff for Fury and for Protection Warrior. So Thunderblast, Lightning Strikes, and Ground Current damage increased by 6%. Arms Warrior got a nerf on Bladestorm by 10%, which is crazy in my opinion. But Fury getting a nerf on Bladestorm by 10% is actually big. To be fair, I would like them to hit the Slayer hero talents instead of like Blade Storm damage, because if you're playing Mountain Thane and you have Blade Storm, you will do 10% less damage, while the problem is Slayer, not really Blade Storm. Odin's Fury again hit by 15%. I think at one point people are not going to play Odin's Fury, but PvP Fury got like a big nerf with that, because Odin's Fury are like the enablers to one-shots. Like you're going to charge Odin's Fury and then you're going to do a big rampage, for example, and you're already starting with doing a lot of damage. But if it's like nerfed and nerfed and nerfed, at one point that go, or like that semi-go, is not going to happen anymore. So I wonder where they're going to go for that. Mountain Thane, they got a buff on Strength of the Mountain, increases Bloodthirst and Rampage damage by 20% instead of 15%. To be fair, I really like Mountain Thane, but right now it's not really usable. I think the damage is just too low compared to Slayer. Even the Slayer strikes, which in the beta was not that impressive, and the Mountain Thane was actually doing okay damage with Lightning Strikes. Now Lightning Strikes does less damage than a Slayer strike, which again, those are both like passive or like strikes that are not doing much outside of those passives. So it would be nice that they are actually hitting on Mountain Thane to be a bit stronger, and maybe nerf a bit Slayer. I would say also for Arms Warrior, like buff Colossus, nerf Slayer to put them at equal scale. But I understand why Slayer is so super popular in PvP, because it gives you more mobility, more Blade Storms, more like liberty to do your damage. So I understand that. Now PvP changes, those are the big ones. Those are the things that are going to be meta related changes. So we have Frost Fever damage is no longer increased in PvP combat, it was 25%. So that is big for both Unholy Decay, because they also have Frost Fever with the triple disease talents, but you also have Frost Decays, like also like Unholy Decay and then Frost Decay also being hit because of that, because again it's their only disease that is doing good damage, and that is going to be nerfed because of that. So we'll have to see how it's going to be. 24% is quite big. Like that nerf, like that removal of the buff is actually quite big. The icon for lesser anti-magic shells from Vestigial Shell has been updated to be distinct from regular anti-magic shell, so you cannot actually see from where it comes. And Rider of the Apocalypse Horseman's Aid, which is the anti-magic shell from your horseman, is reduced by 50% in PvP combat, which is a good change. It was too strong. It was a passive AMS every single time, and it was a bit too strong. So now it's nerfed. That's good for the casters as well. So like I said, Unholy Decay and Frost Decay got hit, and that was kind of my prediction as well on the tier list. Like Unholy Decay, they were going to hit it, like regardless. You have Havoc Demon Hunter getting buffed, so the hunt damage and damage over time are now reduced by 15% instead of 28%. So it's a good buff overall. We have Evoker Disintegrate damage is no longer increased by 20% in PvP combat. That is actually offsetting the buff, but also nerfing on top of it, which is a normal thing. I think Disintegrate does too much damage for Devastation Evoker and Preservation Evoker, because they can both do that. So that's a good nerf. And Preservation Evoker got hit on their biggest heal, so which is Living Flame. Living Flame got procs over procs over procs, so actually like multi-heal every single time. And it was doing around 35% to 40% of overall healing in PvP, whenever they are doing PvP. So doing a 20% nerf on top of that is actually quite massive. It is not going to make them like all of a sudden very bad, but it's going to bring them in line with the other healers. Now, what I would like to see is to buff the other healers instead, but for now they're not doing that. Beast Mastery, like I said on the tier list, they were not doing well and they were bound to get buffed and they were going to be buffed in mid-season, but this is going to be a welcome buff for now. So we have kill command damage increased by 15%, which I found logical. Cobra shot damage increased by 15%, which is for now not really like important, but in mid-season it will be important because there is like a build where you can play Cobra Shot and do some good damage. You have kill shot damage increased by 40%, which is big, but even more big if you are thinking about mid-season with how Black Arrow is going to replace kill shot in Dark Ranger hero talents. So that's going for now going to be quite good, but also Barb Shot damage increased by 20%, which is going to be noticeable. Those buffs are going to help with Beast Mastery being a bit more in line with the other specs. Now, is it going to be still like a D tier spec? I think with those buffs it might be going up, because the problem of BM100 is actually throughput of the damage that you're doing. If you're doing no damage, Beast Mastery just doesn't work because it is about damage. Like CC is cool, but it is like like especially in slow shuffle, CC is not like the thing that is making you win most games. You can CC, but often it's like a freezing trap, so it's going to be broken anyways. And sometimes you can win because someone is not breaking the freezing traps. But it's like the damage and the throughput that you're doing over course of a match that is going to be lasting, because you have like an MS effect, for example, you have dampening, and then you can get kills because of that. But if your damage is very low, then it's not meaningful. So obviously these are good changes. People are going to be outcrying about, they're going to say Beastmaster is going to be OP. Don't listen to them, because the damage is still not on the level of an Hunter. Don't worry about that, it's not going to change, but at least it will feel, my prediction would be B tier, because of like the damage, like overall damage is going to be increased. Like kill shot doing more damage is good, because if you're playing Dark Ranger, you get a kill shot proc from the get-go. If Barb Shot getting damage increase is also good, because you have a lot of talents that are going to help you with Barb Shot. And kill command 15% is going to be noticeable, because this is your like spammable ability. Cobra Shot is still not something you're going to cast in PvP until mid-season, where there are some builds where you can play around that. Now, Mistweaver got again a nerf on Peaceweaver, so now it is reduced by 30 seconds on revival instead of 60 seconds. It was 90 seconds at the start of the season, at pre-season, if I'm not mistaken. Now it's 30 seconds. Now, I think this nerf has nothing to do with solo shuffle, nothing to do with 3s or 2s. This has to do with solo QRBG. Mistweaver is probably the best healer in solo QRBG with Preservation Evoker, because they have Peaceweaver, which is super big with revival being reduced, but also like being like an auto dispel for everyone. You have Life Cocoon, which is one of the best abilities whenever there is no dampening. Like it's literally a second health bar, which is massive as well. It's I think even more than a second health bar, to be fair. And in general, Mistweaver is very hard to stop, especially if they start to play with like fist weaving and such, and you're playing like a bit like a comp that doesn't have a lot of casters. It becomes very annoying for your build, for your team to have actually like down like a Mistweaver. You have to CC him and like bring them out of the fight instead of trying to like kill him. So this is going to help with the nerf, but it's going to hit solo shuffle and 2s and 3s, where Mistweaver is not really like the supreme healer. So I don't know if there is going to be some compensation at the end, but this is going to be like very, very hard to like swallow for a lot of Mistweavers that are playing solo shuffle. But people that play solo QRPGs, you should not even be surprised. They are going to try to like balance it around as well, until they actually balance around between the brackets. For now, it is just how it is. So I think this talent is going to be taken only if you don't want to have a drawback of the magic effects that you're going to dispel with it. But overall, 30 seconds is not really a massive PvP talent anymore. Like it's going to be a 2 minutes and 30 seconds CD instead of like a 3-minute CD, which is not that impressive in general. Windwalker coming in with wind damage increase is no longer reduced in PvP combat. It was reduced by 50%. I don't know how much damage it actually does, so I'm very sorry. It could be a very big buff, but it could also be just like a minuscule buff because they don't play with it, for example. Shadowband, Wisdom of the Walls, shadow damage is reduced by 50% in PvP combat. I think Shadowband is the one that you're playing in solo shuffle. I'm not really sure. I think the other one with the Celestial Conduit is maybe the one you're playing. I don't know. I don't really know too much about windwalker, so if someone wants to comment below how big the changes are, let me know. Now, Holy Paladin got a buff on survivability, which was something I was looking forward to because it is a spec that gets kind of drained down. Especially in Soul Shuffle, we often say, look, go for Holy Paladin, it's going to die. Divine Protection damage reduction is increased by 50%, which is a big buff to survivability. And then you have Sanctified Plates, now increases armor by 20% and stamina by 10%. This is going to be good. This is going to help them survive a bit more. And like again, train Holy Paladin is still going to be a thing, I guess, especially if they don't have like anything versus like magic damage. But that's going to be noticeable. And then Protection Paladin got the same buff, but I don't know how big it is for Protection Paladins. I don't see them like a lot, so I don't see that really be impactful. Subtlety Rogue got a nerf on the Reverberation talent on the class tree, which is going to augment echoing reprimand by 100%. Now it's reduced to 70%. So right now, if you're doing like a echoing reprimand build, you're doing around 1.7 million, 1.8 million crit. It's going to be reduced by 30%. So it's going to be quite massive on nerf, to be fair. But I think still people are going to play that if they're going to play about the spenders instead of, about the builders instead of spenders. I think it's going to be a good nerf, but I don't know. I think there's still a few things. Again, mid-season is going to change a lot of stuff, so I don't know. There is a lot of stuff that could be changed, and that could be helped to mitigate the one-shot potential of subtlety. But again, if they don't really one-shot, then what do they do, right? Enhancement Shaman, again, my spec. I said already that they were going to get buffed, and in mid-season they already get like some changes that are very interesting, so I'm going to make a video about that as well. But I already made a video, but they made even more changes. But Enhancement Shaman, Storm Strike damage increased by 20%. Again, you have like a 2% buff on the 2 set, but also a buff like overall 4% on your ability damage, which is actually a reverse to nerf from previous week. So that is going to be massive, especially if you're like in Ascendancy and you have Wind Strike. It's going to be very, very noticeable. Ice Strike by 40%, that is going to be noticeable, especially if you have like you're running a bit of mastery, like for example me. Frost Shock damage increased by 40%, that is going to be massive for the Frost Shock build, so you could maybe change your builds into Frost Shock damage. And you could do actually a lot of damage with that. Fire Nova by 40%, that's a bit less of a thing, but you can still play around Fire Nova. And then Lava Lash by 20%, which was already critting and hitting for a lot. So the Elementalist build is buffed, the Storm build is buffed, even the Frost Shock Storm builds are also buffed. So you have a lot of stuff right now that really screams to me wins, and I'm really happy about Enhancement Shaman. To be fair, right now on my tier list it was C tier, but in my heart it was more B tier. I do feel like Enhancement Shaman is not that bad. It is bad in certain matchups where you could feel really like a D tier, but I think that those buffs and those mid-season changes are going to help massively Enhancement Shaman, and I look forward to that. Now, Affliction Walks, I'm very sorry guys, I kind of called it. You were going to be nerfed, it's normal. Shadow Bolt was doing like top 2%, like top 2 damage in general in a match, and it was all about the instant Shadow Bolts. And now it's getting nerfed by 25% in total, so we have damage reduced by 15% PvP command for Shadow Bolt, but also 10% on the Soul Harvest talent from Necrolite Teachings. Maybe there's a world where you're playing with Soul Drain. Now the issue is with Soul Drain is you can be kicked, so you have to think about, do you want instant damage or do you want to have like the drain that is going to do more damage than a Shadow Bolt? So that is your choice. Corruption being nerfed by 10%, but also Wither by 10% because it's like the same ability, to be fair. And then still Affliction got a damage buff by 30% in PvP combat, but also the backlash. So now this is interesting because there might be a build where you're only playing with like a singular unstable affliction and you're picking all the unstable affliction buffs on your SPEC tree, and you could actually do top damage with unstable affliction. Now the issue is having dispel protection is very good to have it on everyone instead of like one person. The PvP talent kind of reduces your damage by 60% on unstable affliction, So that's why you're not seeing a stable affliction very high. But if you're not taking the talent and you're taking every single talent for a stable affliction to work, it could be a very interesting build to play around. So I'm looking forward to people that are going to play that and I'm going to test that. I think Shadow Bolt being reduced by 24% is big because it like was critting around 1 million. So it will be 750k and probably normal hits around 500k, which is I think respectable. Right now it was critting and hitting for more than a Chaos Bolt. So a normal hit Shadow Bolt would do the same damage as a Chaos Bolt, which in my opinion was a bit laughable. Now those are good changes. Now is it going to be, because in my books it was S tier in Soul Shuffle, it might be now that it is going to drop to A tier, not A plus but A tier, because Shadow Bolts were what you were doing to kill targets. Like it's not like Corruption or Agony that was killing targets. It was like your Shadow Bolts and Haunts doing a lot of damage and your Malefic Rupture spams. Malefic Rupture is untouched, so that is still a thing. And you might go for Hellcaller for safer gameplay or Silva Avesta if you are like really going to spam a lot of Malefic Ruptures. You have both playstyles. I think Warlocks have like Affliction Warlock is very good for that because you have like two hero talents that are working very well together, so that's a good thing. Destruction Warlock again above, like I said, the 6%, and then you have 15% increased damage on Chaos Bolt, 15 on Incinerate, 15 on Soulfire. They got a nerf on the cast time of Soulfire, so now it's going to be 60% PvP count instead of 80%. But I think that's fine. And then Wither damage reduced by 30%, so they really want you to go away from Hellcaller. But I understand because like having it like top damage is kind of silly because it is instant. It should not be doing the same damage as Immolation. So Immolate is going to be interesting to play if you want to have damage, and Wither is going to be interesting if you don't want to like cast Immolates every single time. Diabolist, Ruination damage increased by 15%. That is something I already saw coming because it was doing less damage on the Chaos Bolt. But this is actually just following the Chaos Bolt route, but it does less damage, right? It has to crit to be meaningful. It doesn't crit automatically, so it does less damage on a Chaos Bolt whenever it's normal hitting, and whenever it's critting, it does more than a Chaos Bolt. So that is the problem I see with Diabolist. It should be like a crit guaranteed, and that would be very much good. But I like Diabolist. I like the gameplay of it. I just think it's not very practical in PvP, and the pets, like the summons that you have, are sometimes very situational. Sometimes you want those pets because you're in melee, and sometimes you want to not have that pet come out because it's really not going to have a lot of value because it is not melee that you are, like if you're fighting someone that is ranged. But overall, the meta has probably shifted. I look forward to see that. Enhancement big buffs, PM Hunter big buffs, Outlaw Rogue in my books big buffs. So all the specs that I'm playing currently that are C tier, they are going to be way better right now. So I'm looking forward to, like, I'm very much a hipster on that. So hopefully I do get a lot of value. And yeah, I'm looking forward to. Again, thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate you. It was a long video, a long recap of classes, changes and whatnot. But I do like to give you like explanation on what I feel like it's going to change in PvP. Like I could read it for you guys, but like I said multiple times on those videos, I could just link the link of Warhead and you do the reading. And would not matter, right? So I want to give you value for your time. So again, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye.